like everybody around you is moving forward, getting this job or promotion, and in general being on an endless streak of winning. We as humans are conditioned to get dopamine out of praise, so it's no surprise that we tend to share our success on social media much more often than we do when it comes to the failures that probably paved the way for it. And since I truly believe that we are in dire need of more building informational modeling fuck-up stories, today I will share with you my top 5 key takeaways from creating my first ever full-scale Revit API C# plugin as a completely self-taught developer. Welcome back, and for those of you who are new to this channel, this is me, Hristina, and my superpower is helping creative people get the best of any building information modeling software faster. However, this has not always been the case, as any superpower is never gained overnight. And a truth that we often do not admit is that to really get good at a certain skill, you have to be willing to do two things. First, to fail a lot more than other people, and secondly, to fail in public for everybody to see, as criticism often is a powerful trigger for us to change and improve. And such was the case with me. Years ago, back at university, I had a friend roasting me completely for still plotting my drawings from the AutoCAD model space instead of using viewports and sheets at the time. And in many ways, though this experience was momentarily unpleasant, it really motivated me to improve my AutoCAD skills, and I even went so far to learn how to create my first add-in with Autolist, which, really thinking hard about it, probably was the beginning of my career as a BIM developer. But you need not only wait for the push of external criticism. One habit that I found extremely helpful in my case to improve my programming skills is to just go back and revisit old projects and just see what I can do better with my newly gained skills and perspective. And one such case will be today, as I'm going to share with you 5 key takeaways from my first ever full-scale Revit plugin project. But before we move on with my own personal Revit API fuck-up story for today, I'd like to thank the 400 plus subscribers who decided to support this channel. To say the least, your comments, encouragement, and in general support has been a great motivation for me to just continue doing all of these videos. So thank you once again. Number 1, implementing best C# coding practices in your projects. Well, this one seems pretty much on the nose for anyone who has a strong background in development. However, as a structural engineering major, the programming courses that might be included in your curriculum will not get you much further than working with loops and implementing conditional statements. So it's no surprise that when I revisited some of my code, I could easily spot some basic misunderstandings about working with naming conventions. For example, like using the Pascal case for classes and methods and the camel case for variables. Another thing that I feel like I definitely did not get right the first time was also writing my methods well. And what do I mean by that? Well, I do feel like I really tried to pack too much functionality in a single method, something that probably will make your code not very readable. Moreover, I feel like the try and catch statement that is extremely important when it comes to handling exceptions and maintaining your code in the long run was pretty much missing from my logic entirely. Number 2, write your user interface first and learn a little bit more about WPF forms, and especially about WPF application design patterns. Most Revit add-ins out there might start as a few buttons that need no input on the user end. However, this is a little bit limiting, and if you're trying to build something that has wider application, you will probably need a way for your users to interact with your code, which is essentially a WPF form. And eventually, an application like that will fully evolve into a WPF one with multiple forms. This might be a little bit overwhelming for anyone who's just starting out. However, one recommendation for you is to try to fully build your Revit button ribbon together with its relevant WPF forms, and only then move on with the actual backend, let's say, of your add-in, because in this way you will have a plan for you that will map out exactly how your data will flow through your code. And it will be much easier to move over to the Revit API and search for the relevant solution. And this is especially true when you're working completely on your own. Another thing that I think it's really worth exploring now looking back, is just understanding a little bit more about design patterns. One of the most popular design pattern for WPF applications out there is the model view model pattern. Probably if you already used a WPF form in your code, you already implemented this pretty much in practice, where you have classes that are the model and they deal only with the data from Revit, your XML file, which is essentially the form, and another class that helps you connect the interface, the XML, to the data from the Revit model. Number 3, understanding multithreading in C#. All right, this one I consider a little bit more advanced topic. In general, I found out about multithreading the hard way. My first application started freezing at certain parts, and I had to find a solution. And one of the most common solutions is to use multithreading. In general, if you've just completed your first C# course, you probably know how to use a single thread. That is to say, your code runs from top to bottom and executes in a linear sequence. However, when you have time-consuming processes or large datasets, you might want to run multiple processes at the same time. And to do so, you really need to know a little bit more about that. I don't think you need to get into it right away. However, you can start with some basics like understanding the application of the async and await keywords in C#, and maybe later on get into some thread managing techniques. Number 4, run Revit API in context. Okay, this one really comes up when you start working with WPF forms, and also ties back into maybe understanding a little bit more about multithreading in C#. In general, when you work with WPF forms, you can open them either as model or modeless. The difference is, first, in the methods you use. When you work with a model WPF, you open it with the show dialog window, and what happens is that the original code that opened this window pauses and waits for the form to close. So basically, you have still a single thread running through your code, and when you try to execute a Revit API script, it works perfectly. However, when you open your WPF form as modeless with the show method, what happens is that your main code that opened the window keeps running while you have this new process executing next to it. And when you try to run a Revit API code from this modeless window, you will get the exception Revit API is running out of context. There is definitely a workaround for that, and this has to do with using external event handlers. But if at this point you don't want to deal with that, just stick to using model WPF forms. Number 5, unit testing. Alright, so one thing that I find particularly frustrating, especially in the beginning when I didn't know much about testing when it comes to development, was the thing where you create an application, you seem to have done debugging it and sort of manually testing it in Revit for yourself, and you send it off to someone, and a completely unforeseen problem sort of comes up. One important realization from me and takeaway from that was that I had to go a little bit deeper into understanding how I can test my code, even as a one-person developer. And in general, unit testing is something very common in development, and it's practically the process of testing each smallest logical aspect of your code. You can write your own tests, but luckily at this point, there are some open source Revit plugin testers out there. And one such example is Speckle's XUnit Revit, which you can use to further improve your code. I feel like the topics that we touched upon today could be a video on their own. If you want to explore a little bit more about each of them, I will add some useful links to some nice articles related to each, so you can dive deep on your own. And as per usual, thanks for making it to the end of this video. And for more Revit API and C# content, make sure to like and subscribe.